then introduce the agenda?
So yes, on the agenda today, so as you can see, it's an ad hoc core CG meeting. So not necessarily all topics are being tackled, even though there is plenty of topics being tackled. So on the line 2, here on the topic line, there will be first an introduction about like intraday capacity calculation. There will be a depth on IDCC parallel run and go live preparations, and a capacity improvement study outcomes as well. After that, there will be a break, and we will start with the second topic, which is long-term capacity calculation, where there would be explained the way forward and the roadmap. Improvement on long-term capacity calculation, flow-based capacity with benchmark measures and KPIs. And then interstate agreement, yes, on Slovenia and Croatia border, and NRA and ACER input, and feedback to market participants' questions that have been already sent prior. After that, there will be a topic on day-ahead capacity calculation, on LTA inclusion removal in the initial impact assessment, and then also the impact of the 15-minute MTU SDAC go-live delay on core advanced hybrid coupling project. Finally, we will have a point on derogation on the minimum 70% requirement beyond 2025, and the possibility to issue derogation after 2025 with NRA input. And we will close the meeting with AOB and closure, and also have a point on the next core CG meeting. And that's it.
Then let's start with the first topic of today, intraday capacity calculation. So we have Bernard here in the virtual room with us, and he will start with the IDCCC project, for which actually we've, I think, just sent out also a communication. So if you check your mails in parallel, you will already see that we have confirmed the date and the process for the go live. And this is what Bernard will now elaborate upon in his presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is indeed a short presentation about intraday capacity calculation. So the IDCCC, this is something new. This is the first, because it's the first time that we can announce that we have delivery of capacity in day D for business day D. Until now, it has always been at least D-1, but this is the first time that it's going to be in day D. So we started on the 17th of December of last year, actually already, with a daily publication of results. It's an external parallel run, which is running for 6 months and which intends to end, if it's correct, at business day 25th. So it's delivery of capacity on the 25th for business day 25. That is going to be the first live, and it's also the first time that capacity is delivered. Well, no, not really. Yeah, this is the first time that capacity is delivered to a continuous trading process. Until now, capacity has always been delivered to the allocations, to the auctions, but this time it will then be to the continuous trading. So we are demonstrating good stability, not 100%, but it's close to 100%. So that means there are some days that we still had problems. So you will see in the results that a few days are missing, and then they remain missing because it didn't, the tools didn't work. But each time problems have been solved swiftly, I must say. And well, in general, I have, of course, years of experience with parallel runs in all previous projects. This is really going extremely well. So it is surprisingly how good that we are streamlined now, and how good we are able to do subsequent processes. I was expecting when we go live so quickly with IDCCC that we would see much more operational problems, but it has been very limited. So really very good work by all individual TSOs to make this work so well. So Final confirmation of go live, of course, will be given on the day before. So this is usual practice. You never know what might happen. So we don't expect any problems, but you never know. So we will give a final confirmation on the 24th. All capacities will be published in the next steps. Will also be published, continue to be published on the Java publication tool. Also, it's in the same way as IDCC-A and IDCC-B. Okay, I think that's the most important on this slide. Next slide is a very quick overview of the. Sorry?
I see one hand being raised.
Yes. Okay, sorry.
Is it a general question on the introduction?
Yeah, it was. Thank you for addressing this. It was a question on the stability of the process. I don't know if you should address it now or later.
What I would suggest to do is let's take the questions at the end of a topic. So then we have the dynamic of having all the questions at once. If it is a clarifying question to understand the explanation, then please raise your hand so that we can clarify it on the spot. But if more follow-up questions to get more into the details and the insights, let's do that at the end of Bernard's presentation.
Yeah, I can do it at the end then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, indeed. So there are two presentations. So at the end of IDCCC, we can have the IDCCC questions all together. So then on the individual validations that are taking place, well, they are very much comparable to the IDCCB individual validations that are happening. So it's very much the same process. So it's again a process where we put a maximum time limit of 40 minutes that TSOs get to validate the flow-based domain and to check that all corners, all vertices, or whatever you might call them, of the flow-based domain are feasible in terms of operational security. And so here is a full table of all the TSOs, where in the happy flow validation, most TSOs are going to do IVA validation. And there is two TSOs who are doing both IVA and ATC validation, depending on the situation, on where they are. One TSO is still in ATC validation, and one TSO is not doing validation, being sufficiently confident about the results, and then estimating that there is some background noise from somebody. I was looking to see if I could mute. Where was I? So one TSO does not estimated that there is no risk for operational security in the IDCCC domain, so there is no validation being done. So in terms of ATC validation, it's going to be used quite often by TSOs as a fallback, and in that way. So that means that it is in case the IVA validation process, which is a common process done by several TSOs, which we call the iDaVinci TSOs. If that process fails for whatever reason, it's not very usual that it fails. But if it fails, then there is an ATC fallback foreseen to make sure that the operational security can still be ensured even without a calculated validation. When are these individual validations going to start? Well, these processes were still in development when we started the parallel run. Some of them have already started in the meantime. A few will go live still in the second half of May. And so there is one still foreseen in the beginning of June. So, but most of them will be there in May. So we will have, and we are almost the end of May. So that means most of them are there, and we will start seeing the effect of the local validation. In the meantime, of course, much testing has gone on that. And the current estimation is that these local validations will have very limited impact on capacities. So it's very exceptional. It's rather exceptional that there would be a validation necessary in the IDCC process. I think I explained this earlier. This is, of course, now a process which is based on the IDCF, which means that the whole coordination process on the ACF has run already. And the IDCF is taking the results from the ACF coordination has a continued coordination. So in a way, the IDCF is already including a lot of the remedial actions which are necessary for operational security. So there is no, but it can still happen, of course, that you end up somewhere in a point of business where the operational security is jeopardized. So saying that there will be no validation, I cannot say that, but the estimation is that it will be limited. So which concluded us to say that parallel run results for us are relevant, are representative. Yeah. If you want to have more information on the iDaVinci ATC fallback tool, it's on the next slide very shortly. The tool in the beginning of the run provides fallback ATCs. So that's when the process starts. So at the beginning of the 40 minutes. If the process is successful, then these ATC values are ignored. But if the process fails for a reason, so in an exceptional case, then these fallback ATCs will be applied as an ATC validation. They're always positive or zero, usually positive. And they are based on historical capacity. So they are based on what has historically been acceptable NTCs. So they are set on reasonable levels usually. But it's difficult to give more details on that. But what we have seen in the past is that when they were applied, they were quite reasonable in terms of capacity, so comparable to other days, let's say. Okay, then on the next slide, on the KPIs, so the slides after will show the KPIs. Here already some conclusions. So less negative ATCs on most core bidding zones. So IDCC will give more capacity on more borders than IDCC A or B. That means that some borders will become available in IDCC for trading. Some other borders will see a slight reduction of the capacity, which is mainly due to the fact that you give more capacity on more borders. So you have to spread the capacity which is available. So the usage of the lines is spread over more borders, which means that each border gets a little bit less of the cake, which is to be divided. So the cake is divided over more, so each one gets a little bit less. But when we look at there is a slide which gives you also the amount of capacities between 0, 100, 100, 300, and 300, 500. These instances all increase. So it's really just the biggest capacities which are suffering a little bit by dividing the cake over more borders. So in general, yeah, it's what we expected indeed is that the IDCC was going to give additional capacity compared to IDCCB, and this is it continued to be shown in the parallel run. So next slide. Some background. We have 131 business days in these KPIs, so it's quite a lot. They're very stable at the moment, and they have been stable throughout the parallel run. These are the capacities which are available at 4:30 with and without IDCCC, which are being compared. So we are comparing, the market positions. So we make things comparable. So the remaining capacities from IDCCB at 4:30 in the morning were compared with what IDCCC is going to give. And this will sometimes give you strange strange results in the KPI. You will see more, some borders which have already been fully used, which again become available a little bit. So these things are come out, and then due to fallbacks or sometimes even missing IDCCB results, 12 business days were filtered. So they are given there the complete list of business days that are missing from the KPI results. Okay, parameter settings, nothing new there. It's still about 5% FRM, which is being used. The same for IDCCB as in IDCCC as in IDCCB. It's still not exact 5% because the implementation of this central calculation of the 5% is still ongoing. So this has to be implemented in the common calculation tool. It's soon, but not yet. We still have the 3% PTDF threshold as we have for IDCCB, so the same for the C, and applied for any branch with a RAM of less than or equal to 50 megawatts. And then the next slide. So here you see negative is positive. So I've asked the KPI group that is working on this if they could not inverse the slides, but they say it becomes less correct because it is indeed a decrease in negative ATCs that you see, but it's also an increase in positive ATCs. So it's an absolute difference. So you see that on most borders, you see the decrease in negative ATCs. So that means more and more the borders become open to receive capacities. The next slide is about bidding zone isolation. So there's a bit of difference between import and export. So on the import, you see that imports become a little bit more limiting on some borders, whereas exports on most borders improve. So again, negative value is an improvement here. And then the complete bidding zone isolation, I think the important ones that we remember were Netherlands mainly, and then Belgium and Romania. Well, for Netherlands and Belgium, we do see the decrease in bidding zone isolation. For Romania, unfortunately, not. There's not a lot that can be done about it because, as you know, Romania is still an antenna currently in the core region, so it's very difficult to remedy this a lot. Okay, next slide is about the mean positive ATCs. So here a positive value is an improvement, so the average value increases. Well, on most borders, the average value is indeed decreasing. On some borders more than on others. It's mostly on those borders where there was a lot of capacity to give, where there's now less capacity to give. And this is, I repeat it for one last time, it's because the cake is divided over more borders, and you see it more on slides 14 and 15. But first, slide 13 gives you the comparison of slide 12, but then in absolute values. So where you can compare the bars. So it looks quite heavy in the slide before, but on this slide it's a bit more positive, the message. And so you see indeed that the decreases are there, but they're not huge on most borders. Slide 14 shows that it's not a very easy one-to-one. So it's not always the same capacity that get increased or decreased. So there is a shift. Some negative capacities become positive, but also positive capacities become less positive, and there are even some positive capacities that became negative. So yeah, these things can happen. So it's and then slide 15 gives you the total number, and so the blue is B4, so is IDCCB capacities that are still there, and the red is the capacities that are given by IDCCC. So you see a very big decrease between 0 and minus 100. So the capacities, even when they are negative, they are much less negative. And so you have much less negative capacities. So it's about 100,000, which becomes like 50,000. So it halves. And then on the positive side, you see a lot of additional capacities between 0 and 100. Between 100 and 300, it's really a big increase in amount of capacities that you see. Also between 300 and 500, there's much more capacities. And then between above 500, there's a little decrease. But in general, yeah, this shows, I think, that capacities are increasing with IDCCC. 16, yeah, not a lot to be seen yet. It's an official KPI, so we show it, but because validations are just starting now, so these are the aggregated values in the 12th of May. Until now, only CEPS has had IVA validation, and it was then even mostly for a test case. So yeah, in general, for now, we still see that we still expect that this will remain very low. So that's all for IDCCC. I think now we can maybe ask the questions on IDCCC before we start with the capacity improvement study.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks, Bernard, for this elaboration. One thing I wanted to add to it, so we've added these distribution KPIs following the last conversation we had in the previous CG to show or support our claim that the decrease in the average that we were showing before is actually resulting from we now have more moments where more borders are opened. So this is what we then see, the positive effect in the redistribution. And this is the principal value of the IDCCC, a more recent grid model that contains the remedial actions, is less pre-congested as a starting point, enables more borders to be opened. So that is the key takeaway actually from the whole KPI analysis from the parallel one. So this was a short wrap up I wanted to make on these results. Now let's move to the questions. So first in line, Mr. Cesaro, please raise your question.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks a lot for the explanation, Bernard. I just had a question regarding the stability of the process. I was checking the monitoring tab on JAO for the parallel run, and I see that there are more than a few days where the data was received late, either or not received at all. And these were, yeah, more than a few instances, so not really close at all to 100%. I can post the chart in the chat so that you can also have a look. I know that JAO has had issues in the past months with the publication of DCC data, so I don't know if these are issues related specifically to the JAO platform or the process as a whole. But if you could clarify a bit on this, please.
So yeah, there are two things. So one thing is indeed that some days have not been calculated. So I gave the list of days earlier in one of the slides. And indeed, recently we have had some issues with the publication tool of JAO. So this is something that we are aware of, and it is being investigated and being solved at the moment. So I had an issue a few weeks ago, and apparently, as I understood, we're also having an issue at the moment. So we hope that this will be solved now permanently, very, very quickly. But it is on publication tool sites, yeah.
Okay, so it's related to the publication tool. Yeah, it would be good if this will be solved for the operational go live, because we rely a lot on the JAO API to retrieve the data that you publish.
Yeah. Okay.
I had a question also on the iDaVinci tool. So there is not a lot of documentation published online regarding this procedure. So could you clarify a bit what would be what are the plausible, or let's say the most common causes of failure for the tool?
Yes, for that, I think we invited Johannes Flair to help. Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Johannes Flair from Amprion, one of the iDaVinci TSOs. The possible reasons for a failure of iDaVinci could be, for instance, compromised input data, or if there's a problem with the transfer of input data, for instance, via ECP from the CCCT, or also bugs which have not been detected during testing. But looking at the recent weeks of testing, it's running rather stable.
Okay, thanks. And follow up on that, would it be possible, you think, to have, let's say, a message from the TSOs prior to the failure to say, okay, this process is likely to fail before actually seeing the validation published on Java at the end of the IDCC process?
Unfortunately not. I mean, we're running the iDaVinci tool during the 40 minutes validation phase, and if it fails, we only notice within this phase.
Okay, I see.
So shortly before the final computation of IDCCC.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for clarifying that.
No worries.
Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
There is also 2 questions in the chat. First one is from Jérôme Michel asking what is the happy flow on the slides with the validation approaches. So if we can move back to that slide. I made an attempt in the chat to answer, but I will also make it here explicit. And now you can compliment me if I overlook something. So happy flow validation means either it's IVA validation, ATC validation, or both combined that are de facto carried out by this TSO. For example, the iDaVinci TSOs do de facto IVA validation. They do not do de facto ATC validation. APG does both. And then when an issue occurs, then we are in the non-happy situation, and the fallback describes what TSOs then have as approach in case of an issue with the standard approach. So what Johannes then explained, for example, for iDaVinci, if the IVA validation does not work, the fallback is to apply ATC validation. Does that answer your question, Jérôme?
I think maybe it was an even more general question, just to know what we mean with happy flow. We mean a process which is running correctly without any fallbacks.
Okay, we see the confirmation from Jérôme, so this question is answered. There is one more question in the chat from Simon Friesen on will new IDCC capacities be published before they appear on XBit? So this is about the timing of publication of the IDCC results. Can you answer that question, Bernard?
I think it's a good question. I would say yes, they will be published at 4:30, but it will be right when they appear on XBit. So I'm not sure if it will be really much before. Yeah, idea is indeed that they are published before they appear. Yeah.
I suggest that
we're going to check that.
Take it
on what is our intention on publishing exactly.
Just to get the timings clarified, because we don't have the details here at hand. So we'll take it as an action post minutes and add that directly into the meeting minutes.
I was not prepared for the question, but yeah, it's now that I think about it, I would say obviously we need to publish before they're activated. So we'll check on that, how much time in advance and then things like that.
Meanwhile, one last question came in on the fallbacks on this slide. We see that most TSOs don't apply fallback procedures, ? Could you explain why not? For instance, if IFA doesn't work, could they apply ATC?
So if it says fallback procedure after go live none, it actually indeed means that there will be no fallback. So that means that TSOs are at that moment in time sufficiently confident that they can do without any other validation. There is also no other validation available. So and this stems again from the idea that anyway, the IVA validation will not be necessary often, so it will be rather exceptional, and so have the exceptional case where both the operational security is an issue and the IVA validation is not working is kind of like an N-2, and then is in that case not considered. For those TSOs who consider that IVA could happen a bit more often, they have foreseen a fallback. Does that help?
Right. It's a question from Davor. Can you let us know? Okay, he confirmed in the chat that this is clear enough. All right. Looking at Celie, is there any concluding message, remark you want to share on the upcoming IDCC go live?
No, I think it's been answered the questions. Yeah, just like the follow-up question would be to clarify also like for capacity published before XPID. Also like clarity whether or not the go live would be on the 25th of June as stated, and if there would be like maybe in the process, are you going to confirm a bit before, if I understood, a bit before the 25th, if it's necessarily going live, when do you think you would give the exact go live before 25th of June?
So
do you
we're
have a
planning to
process?
have.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, we are planning to have an internal meeting between the TSOs on the 24th in the morning, just to make sure that everything is still go. So that just to give a green light from everybody, and then we will send out a message to say that everything is still go for the 25th. That will be,
Okay.
I don't know, around noontime probably, somewhere.
Okay.
I would expect.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
for clarifying. So we will check that then.
Yeah, so it will be very similar to the previous go lives of IDCC A and B. At the moment where we are technically in the process of deploying the systems to the production environment, we will send the message. So here it will be on the 24th, because then we are deploying it. And once the calculation has run successfully, so it's in the night of 24 to 25th, then we will follow up with the communication in the morning to say that, yeah, it has run successfully. So it will not be exactly at 4:30 in the morning already. It will be a few hours after the go live has taken place and the first process has run. You will, for those that follow the Java tool, you will have then the direct view on the go live with the capacities before the communication comes out, just like it was before previous go lives.
Thank you.
Okay. But then, well, on TSO side, the decisions to go live have been taken, subject to successful deployment plan. And then we can also act that we have followed up on the request previously from the CG to bring a final update to you on the process stability and KPI results. And so we can continue to move forward according to plan. And yeah, let's make another go live success. 3 in 1 year. That's a record for IDCC. Okay. Then second topic on intraday capacity calculation, it's the capacity improvement study. So what we present here, when I will present today, is the outcome of a study that TSOs have done over the past 9 months. The formal report is still being finalized. We have to submit it to NRAs and ACER. That will come next week. So we share here the conclusions that we took away from the study, concrete measures that have already been agreed to implement. I'm not going to tell the whole presentation, but it's not yet like with full timings and details. So this is the scope of measures. But then afterwards, when we make things more concrete, when exactly, that will follow in later communication. Just wanted to clarify that already at the start of Bernard's presentation.
Okay.
Bernard, floor is yours.
So indeed, so that was one part of the introduction. So indeed, so we have performed a study. Yeah? So it's not an implementation plan; it's a study on what is still possible in terms of capacity improvements in the intraday capacity calculation process. As a general comment, I have to say, and I've been in IDCC now for 3 years. We have done in the past already a lot of efforts in trying to make the capacities as good as possible. So mostly we've done a lot of efforts on FRM values. We've done an effort on PTDF thresholds and things like that. So we could not expect too much. We were going to do the study and see what is possible, but of course there is no magic, and given the efforts that have already been taken, market margins were tight, so landslides not to be expected. Also know that, of course, most of the improvements that we are going to show here, they will become obsolete once we go live with the ROSC process. And so that means that now we are really focusing on, let's say, quick wins. So things that we can still do this year and certainly be then useful for the few years that we still have, well, the few months or few years, I don't know exactly, until ROSC go live, and then once ROSC is there, of course, then we will have all the benefits from this new process for the IDCC as well. So next slide gives a general overview of what the complete study was supposed to do and also what it did. So there was one part a common assessment and another part on an individual assessment. So one part was about ATC conversion and looking at how this could be improved on interconnectors with non-core bidding zones, and if they could be removed and if that helped in any way the capacity without endangering the operational security. About having more remedial actions closer to real time. This was both in the common assessment and individual assessment, actually. And in the individual assessment, further potential refinements, which have not clearly specified, but in general, if there was a way to improve the input data from a local point of view. Targeted investments in to check whether in which way they help to improve the capacities. And then also to have a look at the alternative bidding zone configurations, which are being studied in another project under ENTSO-E, and in what way they help the capacities. So this was the scope of the study. In a summary, so the study shows indeed that the usage of virtual capacities in initial calculation would augment the capacity, but yeah, given the operational security concerns, we are reluctant to introduce additional virtual capacities. We already have some of them still in IDCC, because you know that the flow-based domain is sometimes containing negative capacity. So that means we already have the virtual capacities. So we are not really in favor of adding another layer of virtual capacity to the IDCC process. And prefer to look for alternative solutions. But we're still I would say we're still investigating if this is a possible path. But for now, the study says, okay, this is not really the preferred path, and also it complicates the validation phase, which is taking 40 minutes now based on the capacities that are already there, the flow-based domain which is already there. If you enlarge further the flow-based domain, the local validation becomes even more complicated. And yeah, we have not yet seen if this would then jeopardize the 40-minute time limit that we have. But if it does, then yeah, you would destroy some other benefits that we are currently seeing from other paths of the study. So that means that for now we are, in a summary, we are reluctant, but we have some other paths. So that being said, so what we have done is for IDCCA is to say we can increase the PTTF threshold, which is currently at 0.5%, to increase it to 1%. This actually helps quite a lot, the bidding zone isolation of cases of IDCCA. Yeah, more than you would expect. So it helps really quite a lot. And another thing in IDCCB is to optimize the business processes, thanks to IT improvements mainly, which allows us to use a later DACF model. And this later DACF model coming from TSCnet and Coreso, these later models include already more coordination, so more remedial actions. And the 15 minutes or something like that, 15 to 20 minutes that we would win actually help quite a lot in increasing capacities, in reducing bidding zone isolation. So these elements already help quite a lot in improving the capacities. They look like very little things, but when you look at the results, it is quite good. So we have these two things. So then on the terms on what concerns MinRAM, so MinATC for now is being let's say discarded a little bit more in discussions we've had between TSOs and also with NRAs. We have seen that minimum ATC on borders is not really very efficient, and is even sometimes more detrimental to all the ATCs being given. MinRAM could help, but it requires further investigation, and so we really need to make sure that we then end up with a process where operational security is not endangered. What else do we have? We have targeted investments that have been implemented, which are also expected to improve intraday capacities. And so these elements together give us a picture of, okay, the study shows that indeed there were some parameters, some small things that we could do with quite significant impact. So it was small things to do, but it was quite significant impact. And so in the end, we discarded some other elements, which was the investigation on a central remedial action estimator or optimizer, not really to say, a mini RAO, because it would have a very big impact on the operational processes, and it was not really very clear yet how we would coordinate this in the current processes before ROSC. We have discarded removing the connects which ending outside of the core CCR, because there is only two possible paths for these connects. So either they are very significant because of some maintenance being done, and then they become quite important to take into account because their PTDFs are becoming quite important, or there is no maintenance, and then anyway they are not limiting the domain, so it is not necessary to remove them because they will not be limiting. So this has been investigated and concluded like that. I think that was the most important on this slide to say. The next slide goes into more detail, and so I think I said most what I needed to say. You will see indeed so the more recent versions of the ACF, 12 to 18 minutes, use some more recent version of the TSCnet security analysis, not every day, but on many days. So which results in more capacities, more in the TSCnet region. For some days, it also contains an update of the Italian IGM, which helps then on the western side in terms of capacities. And both lead to an increase of intraday capacity, but mostly to a lower bidding zone isolation in IDCCB. Additional capacities to further tightening of ATC extraction parameters, so the increase of the PTDF threshold from IDCC-A to 1% also helps to reduce these bidding zone isolations, to reduce the number of negative ATCs. It leads to higher neglected flows in the IDCC-A process, but they can be managed through the local validation process still. So that's all on this slide. Next steps, early July, we are going to have then, well, maybe first next step is that the publication of the study, which is happening in the next week, as Steve has said. And then early July, we're going to have a TSO workshop with NRAs and with Acer. In Q4, we will have a potential IDCCM amendment in case we come out with elements of this study which require a CCM amendment, most of which that I have said until now do not require an amendment, but I think one or two small things might still need to change in the CCM. So that means that would be Q4. 2025, it also says, that means that still this year, but we have not yet put a date on it, is to have these elements that I just said, which are all of them quick wins, implemented. So we will have the higher PTDF threshold, we will have the improvement of the process still this year. When exactly, I don't know, but it shouldn't take too long normally to have this go live. And we will, of course, always keep you informed whenever this will happen. Let me just check the next. I think from the next slide onwards, it goes into more detail. I'm not sure if this is absolutely necessary. Maybe just slides. Yes. On slide 27, and these are pre-read indeed. Yeah. So the rest of the slides were foreseen as pre-read, so I would not go into them in detail unless there are questions on it, and then we will go to them. So it was a very long study. It looks the results looks maybe limited, but we have looked at everything. So we have really looked at a lot of things. We have investigated quite a lot of things. There's been quite a lot of hard work done, I have to say. I'm not inventing this. Quite a lot of hard work done by all the members of the IDCC project team. So salutes to them for all the work that they have done, just to make sure that we didn't leave any path unchecked. That really was the intent of the study, to make sure that we checked all the potential openings and make sure that we didn't forget anything.
We have two hands raised, Zeli and then Julian as sponsor of the project. I think he also wants to make a wrap-up statement of the study. But Zeli, you were first, so you can.
Well, no, but if it's a wrap-up, I can ask my question afterwards. Go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, all right. Let's do that. Thanks. No, not to reiterate too much what Bernard already explained. But the process shows that indeed it's a very challenging, let's say, approach and a process that we are going through. So the study was quite an extensive amount of work, and it is quite challenging to find improvements. Nonetheless, we also see opportunities, and finalizing the study at the deadline means that we are not essentially done at the deadline. So we still see some opportunities to also further discuss the complexity of the room that we can maneuver in with regards to virtual margins, but it has proven to be very difficult at this point in time to conclude upon it. And that's why we cannot simply provide you with any measures in that regard, and we essentially need more time to analyze this. That's probably one of the main takeaways. And the other takeaway is that the low-hanging fruit measures, they will definitely be implemented.
Thank you very much. Then I'll just take the floor if that's okay. First of all, thank you very much for the study and for presenting it. I think market participants may need a bit of time to read the slides that were provided last Friday before perhaps sending any question. I just understand, and maybe it's just to clarify again, that the study will be published next week. That if there is like improvement to be made this year, it will be improvements that don't require amendment. And my question then is, if there are improvements that need amendments, would there be any consultation of market participants and discussions and so on and so forth? I see, Bernard, you're nodding, so.
Yes. So there will be, in case there is an amendment for improvements, as for any amendment procedure, a public consultation organized. So for the moment, with the measures that have been concluded, probably there is no need for an amendment, because adapting the threshold parameter is a flexibility that is offered in the methodology. For the changing of the timings, I don't think that for the CGM that we use as input, I don't think for that we need an amendment. So it will boil down to the further investigation and then what conclusions come out of the application of the MINRAM, as Julian mentioned. And for that, we will also have further alignments and talks with NRAs and ACER in the coming period. So obviously, when there is a development in that, we will inform you about it. And then when there is an amendment, you will see it passing in a public consultation. Also, when we make more concrete the timings for the implementation measures we already agreed upon, these will have to be communicated. So we don't have them yet, but once we have them, we will inform you, of course. You were referring to the study being made public. The study it's not foreseen to publish it. The requirement is to deliver it to the NRAs and ACER. So I'm not sure if it's a specific request or question from your side regarding the publication.
Was rather a question, but I understand. So what you published from the study are the slides that are currently available here, and that we don't expect further clarification or details on this, and then the study would be going through NRAs. But that's clear. I think maybe once market participants had the time to take the slides, maybe there would be some questions that could be asked, and maybe need for clarification. So it's a bit hard to say that now. And also, yeah, of course, it'd be very appreciated even when there are like improvements being made that don't require amendments, that there are like clarity on this when an improvement is being made, whether like through a communication or during a core CG meeting, when there is also like a deadline for the improvement, etc., etc. So that'd be good. Thanks.
Yes, and let's note that as an action point when we make these improvements concrete, and or we identify new improvements, that we do communication through the core CG distribution list.
Great, thank you very much. there is a question from Davor. Sorry, I'm.
Yes, thank you. I have put in the chat my explicit question. What happens with available intraday capacities for continuous trading after they have been allocated at AB and after 25th of June at C allocation? Available intraday capacities for continuous trading are crucial for more and more unexpected events which happen during a day, even a few hours just before the real time. And without them, it's very difficult to balance a portfolio or even the system using intraday trading at single intraday continuous platform. Do you have graphs maybe showing available such intraday capacities for continuous trading? Thank you.
So you mean how the capacities are evolving during the continuous trading and up to 1 hour before real time?
What remains after
what-
they have been
what
already
remains in the
allocated?
end? Okay.
Yes. What remains after A allocation, after B allocation, after C allocation on different borders?
I
Yes.
would say it depends on the amount of allocation, of course.
Of course.
So just to clarify the question further, are you assuming, let's say then, a full allocation of all capacities that are provided in IDC A and B?
Yes.
Okay. So
I
then
think these data are with the power exchanges, so they have the result of the capacity allocation is on the XBit platform.
Yeah, so I think there are two elements of response to your question, Davor.
Okay.
So when it comes to statistics of IDAS, I believe that, or at least I hope that from MCSC side, this is also being shared, or if it's not meeting your requirements, my suggestion is that you raise the question over there, because these statistics are available. How much capacities are used by IDA 1, by IDA 2, by IDA 3. I have seen graphs and figures on it. I just don't know if these have been brought to you in the MCSC consultative group. But for me, that's the right place to address request for statistics on allocation. And then the reason why we do IDCC, that's the second element of response, is exactly to help with the need that, as you frame it, it's to be able to release the capacities closer to real time. So you've seen in the KPI results, there are some more borders being opened. So that's exactly the narrative of doing the recalculations. Yes. And obviously this will be directly in continuous trade. So there will not be an IDA allocation statistics to be seen after IDCCC, because there is no auction taking place.
Okay. Partly my question also involves those loop flows that have been just touched at page 28 of this material. And somehow they also influence the availability of intraday capacities for continuous trading. When some event happens that needs to balance the system or portfolio, usually at the same time we have reduction of the available capacities, intraday capacity for continuous trading. And we have seen this quite often during last summer, during this winter, during the springtime. So when we have an issue and when we need the support from the intraday market, then usually at the available capacities happens almost the same thing, and we can't rely at intraday trading or intraday market, unfortunately, as we used to have maybe a few years ago. I'm not sure if other market participants have experienced the same issue, but usually we are being isolated, as this study has shown that those isolations should have been reduced. So it will be quite beneficial for us market participants to see this study and to read it carefully and to see what we can improve in our steps in order to accomplish and usage those improvements that have been done in ENTSO-E's calculations in order to use intraday markets more efficient.
So for me, the key message behind it is having an isolated bidding zone in intraday market is tricky to manage.
Yes, exactly.
Understanding the reasons behind it is necessary. This is indeed the focus of the capacity improvement study, that we try to minimize this occurrence of bidding zone isolation, to minimize these pre-congestions in the grid model. IDCC is one mitigation measure that we are putting in place, but the capacity improvement study is also looking at it for IDCCB. There will never be a guarantee that it will never occur. It also depends a lot on what the outcome has been of a day-ahead market. If it's already fully used, the available capacities by the preceding markets, then it's kind of a logical consequence of a system state. But what is to be improved is the lack in modeling the remedial actions to address the precongestions in the grid model. So that's the challenge that we have explained before, the challenge of parallel processes. And this is the further study work that we are doing. And this is actually the motivation to look into applying a small level of virtual capacity. It's to be able to have this proxy for the missing remedial actions and solving the precongestions. So I think with a continuation of that study and us in informing you, that will be the way how we keep you informed about these developments for IDCCB. And then for IDCCC, it will indeed be the follow-up of the real capacities once they had been put in operation.
And it's not intended, as Eileen already asked, to publish even for market participants this study, because it really concerns us a lot, the results and all the steps that you have done.
Yeah, I understand your question. I think it's a fair question. Indeed, it impacts market participants a lot, and there has been quite a lot of work done by TSOs with these reports. So we cannot confirm this here on the fly, as we will need to get confirmation with the colleagues, with all the TSOs. But let's take it with us, this request, if we can make the full study public, and not only the presentations we have shown. So let us take it with us and come back to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just maybe to add a bit on what you said, Steve, about the MCSE representative being able to also give some clearer view on SIDC IDAs. Next week, there will be the MCCG, the Market Consultative Group. So Davor, I invite you to also come, because an item will be on IDAs as well, where there will be also like liquidity updates and so on and so forth. And you may be able to also ask further question in that forum as well, if your question are not being answered here as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for your feedback and interest in this topic, which we also take very seriously on our side.
Yes. Thank you very much. That's all from me, I think.
Yeah, no further questions in the chat, so we can close the intraday topic. I think we have now foreseen a break in our agenda. So let's almost perfectly on time. let's take the break until 2:30 and then we join.
Perfect.
Okay, good. See you in
Thank
20
you.
minutes.
See you. So we are just going to switch to long-term capacity calculation topic. There will be, I think, several colleagues presenting. So I think we first start with Patricia. That's you. Start.
Yes, indeed.
So yes, just go ahead. Then it's good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So to begin with, I think this is a nice continuation of the discussion we actually had in Q1 2025. So I think it is a known fact by now that based on the feedback from core NRAs, but also market participants, core TSOs are now focusing fully on the flow-based capacity calculation implementation with the expected go live in November 2026 for the yearly auction 2027. With this being said, the ATC extraction track has been abandoned, and this was really after a thorough consideration of all the feedback that we have received, both on the temporary or the interim ATC extraction track, but also the general implementation of flow-based. The key feedback we are also taking into consideration from the market participant side is especially on the roadmap and the planning of the external parallel run, but also more active stakeholder involvement and early visibility on the improvements for the capacity calculation. Here, perhaps a small disclaimer. So whatever I present today is fully focused on the capacity calculation process on the core TSO side. So this goes both to the roadmap itself, but then also the improvements that we are currently assessing among TSOs. So as said, the improvements are one of the key focus points at the moment for core TSOs. We are fully trying to focus and objectify the LTCC flow-based domain. This is then the inputs to the flow-based allocation, and through our endeavors, we are not only trying to understand the size and trends of the flow-based domains, but also the improvements thereof. We are also in a regular exchange with Acer and NRAs. Here we have received feedback in terms of what sort of refined benchmark the LTCC flow-based domain should be compared to, and what sort of sizing we should target. But then we are also assessing both scenarios with and without LTA inclusion. This is to make sure that we are also then following and reflecting on the further developments of day ahead. There is currently no conclusion on the improvement track or no full conclusion, but then also we are trying to agree on the scope of the potential amendment track that could result from these improvements. What I would like to present today is indeed the updated roadmap. So there we can delve into the external parallel run planning a little bit, also reflecting on the feedback we have received. And then we would like to engage on the measures, the improvement measures for capacities and what sort of KPIs we are using to assess them. And this is all connected to the aforementioned benchmark. There's also then a topic for Acer to present, and we are also then trying to answer the feedback or provide feedback on the questions that we received from market participants. I really hope you will be also able to see the silver lining, because almost every slide actually tackles the questions that were asked from market participants. But then we also have a summary slide providing really the concrete answers to your questions. So maybe if we could go to the next slide. This is an introduction to the roadmap. So following the reconsideration of the LTCC implementation, especially on the interim solution side, TSOs updated the roadmap, and we are now fully focusing on the target solution for long-term capacity calculation with a go live in November 2026. I would say for the market participants, the key update here is that the internal parallel run should continue until Q4 2025. So We are actually performing one as we speak to ensure that TSOs gain the necessary experience, but then for market participants, in order to cover not only the results, but also then the seasonality, and to make sure that we provide you as much insight as possible, we would like to initiate the external parallel run as of November 2025 until October 2026. So basically covering almost the entire year. The feedback from ACER and NRAs is actually supportive of this prolonged external parallel run if it doesn't delay the 2026 go live, which is I would say the main focus and the main deadline. And also the LTCCM amendment is say somewhat dependent or connected to the external parallel run start. So TSOs are now trying to really ensure that we understand the impact on the LTCCM, so the methodology for long-term capacity calculation, and that we would be able to submit it for regulatory approval before the start of the external parallel run. That way we would have as stable conditions as possible. I'd say more information about the setup of the external parallel run, especially on what is the detailed planning, what sort of runs we would do, what are the dates, how the publication will work and what will be published exactly, as well as what is the expected involvement of market participants would be then communicated in the next stakeholder meetings. Make sure that we have sort of a full picture and full package of information provided to market participants ahead of time. So at the moment, what we can really say and restate is that we are trying to take on board the feedback from market participants to provide a longer parallel run covering the seasons, making sure that the insights on the capacity calculation results are as holistic as possible, and we would be engaging further on all the details of the external parallel run in the next meetings. I'm not sure whether we should do questions along the way or whether we would like to collect them towards the end.
We could do a question after each topic. So this one, I think there is like six slides, and then it would be another presentation. We can do it as such, and maybe then a general Q&A at the end of long-term capacity calculation, whole global topic, if that's okay.
Very well. So maybe if we can go then to the next slide. This is a graphical representation of what I just mentioned. So I think the first part is really the most important one. On the capacity calculation side, we are delving into the improvements. To that, we are also maybe counting with some further developments on the CCC tool side, so the central tooling for TSOs. But what is extremely important for market participants is then the line with external parallel run, which is considerably longer than originally anticipated by the methodology or communicated in the past. So we would like to provide as much as we can, and also mimicking then the timing of capacity calculation in production. And we will then provide you with all the information on the publication and how this then aligns also with JAO timings. We are monitoring closely all the dependencies, especially readiness of external systems. This is then also connecting to the LTFBA project, so the allocation side of things. And I would say one very, very important aspect is also then the planning for a potential amendment of the long-term capacity calculation methodology, which is then expected to run in parallel somewhat with the external parallel run, but to make sure that it is already submitted to regulators before we start the parallel run. There are already some of the stakeholder milestones and the key meetings outlined. Obviously, we will provide some more insights closer to these meetings, and not sure whether there will be some further exchange on whether dedicated meetings on external parallel run will be needed, but we are trying to have as much exchange and dialogue as possible. Okay, so then going to the next subtopic, I would say, and this is basically the first 2 lines of the roadmap that I just presented. So this is the improvement track, so the assessment of improvements of the long-term flow-based domain. Here we are as TSOs fully shifting the focus onto how to reach a realistic long-term capacity calculation flow-based domain that would allow for sufficient hedging, also based on the refined historical benchmark and connected to the day-ahead domains. Sorry, there is some background noise.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. I already mentioned the benchmark a couple of times, so this is indeed I would say something that was already discussed in the past. So the benchmark was refined in the discussions with Acer and NRAs. This is basically to outline what a size of a flow-based domain we should strive for as TSOs. There are different ways how the benchmark can be considered, but all in all, this is the basis for the improvements track that we are currently going through on the core TSO side. And it basically outlines that the long-term flow-based domain should reach plus minus 10% of the historical ATCs, with the exception of the AT border, where the benchmark is currently agreed to be 50%. Then there is the special treatment for the Slovenian Croatian border, which we will, I think, tackle in a bit. And there is no specific benchmark for Polish borders. Core TSOs seek further clarification from Acer and NRAs how to apply this benchmark monthly time frame, and also we will be discussing further details on how this should be considered in the KPI analysis. But I think this is really the common ground at the moment with Acer, NRAs, and TSOs on how to set the metrics for this improvements track and how to really define a realistic long-term flow-based domain. There is also another side of the consideration, which is the removal of LTA inclusion. This is then requiring a bit wider scope of this improvements assessment, because we are shifting the physical to financial. And here we are trying to assess both scenarios with and without LTA inclusion. This is mainly to understand how the long-term domain actually fits, or to verify the flow-based domain for long-term with the flow-based domain of day ahead, to make sure that the revenue adequacy stays in check. And in a way, we are trying to now assess the bandwidth of capacities or the long-term domain between the day-ahead domains and also the historical benchmarks to sort of understand what the range should be or would be to arrive to acceptable capacities. I think it is also important to say that TSOs are fully aware that even if the refined historical benchmark is considered, this can lead to higher volumes, and offered capacities would be actually higher than the natural hedge. And therefore, we are actually perceiving this day-ahead consideration as one of key aspects of this KPI analysis we're performing at the moment. Going on to the next one, to make the KPIs a bit more concrete, actually. So what we are trying to do is to assess the measures that would actually lead to this realistic LTCC flow-based domain, and how to improve the flow-based domain. So we have been, as TSOs, assessing the degrees of freedom in parameterization, which was especially targeting collective min-RAM increase, outage consideration. I think we already mentioned that last time in the CG, but also whether a reduced number of timestamps would actually be something that would help the flow-based domain. At the moment, the insights we're getting from the KPIs show that these degrees of freedom would actually not allow for a precise calibration of the domain, and that could lead to very varied results for individual TSOs. So there the preliminary conclusion is not to change these parameters. However, as core TSOs, we are focusing on the assessment of the MinRAM parameterization on CNEC level. So it is a bit more zooming into the domain and truly calibrating on where the capacities are needed based on the KPI assessments and comparisons with benchmarks. There are different approaches which could apply for this MinRAM setting on CNEC level, but it is currently the most supported and most tangible measure to improve capacities, and the technical concepts will further need to be defined by TSOs. And also we are trying to see the high level of coordination for this measure and how to apply it in our process. So the KPIs we are using for this assessment are the standardized KPIs that has been already used for other timeframes. So they had an intraday. So we are using the min-max net positions, also maximum bilateral exchanges on borders, as well as insights into which connects are truly limiting in the flow-based domains. The min-max net positions and the maximum bilateral exchanges are basically showing what are the I would say the bracket. It is a bracketing exercise to see how much can be imported or exported, or what are the exchanges that would be possible on these borders. Here maybe to mention this is a theoretical concept, so this is non-simultaneously feasible exchange. But to make a bridge to a more simultaneous feasibility, we are also, as TSOs, assessing new KPIs, which is the NTC factor and MinRAM level per CNEC and per TSO. This is taking into consideration the historical NTC, so basically the refined historical benchmarks. And we are trying to see from both sides how this historical NTC would fit into the flow-based domain and when. Depending on the parameters. And then from the other direction, we are also looking at what MinRAM level per CNEC would be needed to meet the refined historical benchmarking. To make the connection then to day ahead, we are looking also at the financial reimbursement of the allocated domain and the congestion income. So this is really to see what sort of long-term transmission right payouts would be necessary depending on the size and allocations in long term, and how this then connects to day ahead with and without LTA inclusion. And I think this is really one of the key pillars of the assessment to make sure that we actually get the size of the long-term domain right, also from the financial risk exposure perspective. Maybe to note is that the additional analysis of day-ahead CNECs and statistics thereof is more to verify and supplement these discussions, and the key focus is then on the congestion income and payouts and basically the remuneration part of this KPI. So I would say this is really a full package, and the assessment should really not only look at the basic KPIs, but also into more advanced KPIs, especially connected to the benchmark, both the historical refined one and the day ahead one. Now I forgot a bit what is on the next slide. I'm not sure whether I should already. Yes, indeed. So here are the questions from market participants, and I think I tackled most of them. Not sure, Zeli, whether I should actually present this, or whether there are any questions, or how would you see it?
So far, there are no questions. So if you could maybe tackle the ones that were not necessarily answered. I know so external parallel run has been extended. So thank you for taking into account this request also. And then maybe the other points, perhaps could you go forward?
Indeed. So I think for the external parallel run, there is also the aspect of publication and how the results will be published. So as we are no longer pursuing the ATC extraction implementation, the final flow-based domains would be published. As said, the specifics of the publication frequency, scope, and basically all the details would be communicated closer to the external parallel run. And also we would like to as much as possible align our publication during the external parallel run with the production timeline. So basically then market participants would be able to compare the results hand in hand and almost in real time, let's put it this way. And then on the scope of the data, what I can already tell you is that the similar scope of data as published for day ahead and intraday in the past would be provided also for long term. But I think now it is maybe a bit more abstract. We will be communicating then the entire overview of what and when will be published closer to the external parallel run. On the next one, so there was a question about the understanding of the methodology and what should be applied. As already mentioned, the ATC extraction implementation track was abandoned, and TSOs are fully pursuing the flow-based implementation. Currently, the valid long-term capacity calculation methodology will be followed, including potential improvements. These improvements are then connected to the parametrization that I just presented. This is to especially reach the acceptable levels of capacities, but the basic scenario logic of the long-term capacity calculation process will be kept. So we are not seeking a revolution, it's rather fine-tuning and improving. At the moment, our efforts indeed focus on the improved results for the 2026 go live. And then obviously there is also the further evolution of long-term markets and the capacity calculation method in the future that will be addressed most probably with the FCA 2.0. But these efforts are currently out of scope of the core LTCC implementation, and that's why we are also not delving into these details in our planning or the current LTCC amendment. Sorry, Steve, there is some background noise. I'm not sure whether you want to say something, but yeah, someone was speaking around you. And then the last one, the LTCC related questions with regards to the LTA inclusion removal. For the revenue adequacy, as said, we are trying to now perform this in-depth analysis of the flow-based domain in relation to the day-ahead congestion income and the revenue adequacy. And this is part of the exercise for the general sizing of the flow-based domains, but also to understand what is the potential risk and if there are any further improvements needed in the process. But basically, we are really focusing on understanding of what the risk is, if any, and yeah, this is part of the exercise at the moment. For the DAT impact, the question was about whether the current capacities would be kept for the DAT. I think it is visible also from the benchmark discussion that the DAT consideration will be different in the future. So with the implementation of the coordinate... Sorry, Steve. Yeah. With the implementation of long-term capacity calculation, which is a coordinated process, the DAT setup will no longer be kept, and basically the capacities that would be result of the capacity calculation process will be offered for allocation. Obviously, maybe TSOs from Germany and Austria could say more about this, but the general answer would be that we would be following the capacity calculation process with the implementation of LTCCM.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Patricia, and thank you for having taken into account all the questions we've been sending. And also, I remind also thank you for accepting the request of extending the external parallel run from 6 months to 12 months. So far, I don't see any questions in the chat. I just want to remind Mike and participants that oh, there is one.
There is one in the Q&A function.
In the Q&A
chat.
function. That's where I missed it. But do you want to say something before, Steve? You had your hand raised.
Yeah, on the last point, so I did wanted to restate that clarification on German-Austrian border has already been brought by E-Control and ENTSO-E in previous CG meetings. So what has been said over there, of course, still stands. So this 4.9 gigawatt will cease to exist with the go live of the whole project and the long-term flow-based allocation. And it will be subject to the same capacity calculation rules as any other border. So the only link that is preserved with this 4.9 gigawatt is in the benchmark definition of the benchmark itself.
Okay. Then I'm just going to switch to the question that was in the Q&R chat. So there is a question on does no specific benchmark for Polish border means there won't be any allocation constraints? Don't know if you.
Indeed, so I would not make a connection between the benchmark and the capacity calculation results in the sense of how or what is considered for the capacity calculation. What was meant by this statement is that when comparing the results to the history, there is no specific value set for Polish borders, as currently the allocation or the historical allocation is 0. So the Polish borders will be normally considered in the capacity calculation process, but when comparing and during this analysis TSOs are now performing, there is no specific value set for Polish borders, as currently there is no allocation.
Thank you. Is that clear for the person who answered the question, asked the question? Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then there is a hand raised as well, so please, you can take the floor.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Hrvoje Miličić from Croatian NRA. I would just like to present one statement and maybe one question. First, regarding the possible amendment proposal for the long-term capacity calculation methodology, I just want to express that the position from all core NRAs is that
sorry, Hrvoje, I'm not sure whether it's just me, but it is very hard to hear you because your line is breaking.
Sorry,
I could hear you now. Fine.
Is it better?
Okay, so it's me. Apologies.
Okay. I would just like to say that regarding the potential amendment proposal for the long-term capacity calculation methodologies, core NRAs support the amendment proposal with the final aim to enlarge the domain. And of course, we see that the optimal way would be to define the fixed parameters in this amendment proposal. So this is really the statement that we already conveyed to TSOs, and I think it's important that also market participants are aware that this is really how we currently see the involvement of the long-term capacities, and we think that really the fixing parameters in amendment is a optimal way forward. It is how we see. And now the question regarding the external parallel run. I was just wondering for this external parallel run, which is now supposed to be 12 months, we of course support it if this will not endanger the go live, let's say. And the question is, in this external parallel run, will TSOs, let's say, include all the bits on the borders which are in comparison that are competing with each other? I mean, in the flow-based environment, flow-based allocation, we know that all bits are competitive one to each other. So I'm just checking, will this be somehow enabled during this external parallel run? Because then we can expect some or new results about the outcome of the whole capacity calculation and allocation process. Thank you.
Yeah, so indeed, as mentioned, the specifics of the external parallel run and how it will function, this will be provided later on. But already today, I can tell you that besides the coordinated capacity calculation, the flow-based setup for allocation will be also mimicked during the external parallel run. I think this is to be also clarified how the allocation results will be published. But for the capacity calculation, all the outputs should be provided in the publication tool. But everything should be as it will be in the production with the LTFBA.
Thank you for clarifying, Patricia. I don't see further questions. In any case, if you have questions that you think about during the next presentation that are regarding this one, you can write them in the chat, and don't hesitate also to put the number of the slide. We will also have a Q&A moment after tackling all the long-term capacity calculation topics, so we can come back to this topic if there are questions as well. So I think maybe we can switch to the next presentation if there is nothing to be added now. Yeah, okay, so let's switch then. Thank you. And
go ahead.
Yes. So this is indeed on the topic of the Slovenian-Croatian border. And there are slides from the respective NOAs. And I believe there is also a slide that will be presented by Acer. So I suggest that we leave both these two presentations. I think it's only 2-3 slides in total. And then if there are questions, we can take them after the two presentations. So
Okay.
First up is Jorge and Marco.
Thank you. We have discussed with Hervé and agreed that I present these two transparencies in brief. The first one introduces the most important provisions of the intergovernmental agreement between the governments of Slovenia and Croatia from 2003. By this intergovernmental agreement, the contracting parties defined that each one has the right to half of the capacity, and that half of the capacity of the nuclear power plant Krško, both in terms of capacity and the energy, belongs to each party. The problem is that was given in form of an exclusive right. As you see, in the third paragraph here, also the TSO has to give the transmission right to the Croatian shareholder in form of a right, and it is bound to a border. We cannot ignore this request. Next slide, please.
Marco, is it possible to speak closer to your mic, please? There are some participants that don't hear clearly.
Sorry, I have a headset. Is that not clear?
I can hear you, but you sound a bit far from your mic, maybe for some market participants. If there's a possibility to have your mic a bit closer to you when you speak. If your headset, I don't know how it's your headset, but if not, it's okay.
Sorry.
What about now?
Yeah, that's perfect. We hear you really clearly.
Is now better? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
From the first transparency, which was already presented, there are only two important things. One is that the intergovernmental agreement gives the right to each of the two shareholders to nuclear power station Krško on the energy and on the capacity. And the problem is that in the third, that right is specified in the third paragraph here. The problem is that this transmission right is given and bound to one specific border, Croatian-Slovenian border. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the facts. The capacity, we always insist on the formulation half of the power and half of the energy of nuclear plant Krško, because those of you who are familiar with nuclear engineering and safety will know that this capacity may slightly differ and slightly change over time. That's why we say at present it is about 700 megawatts, and we're talking about one half of it, so 350 megawatts, which have to be given and guaranteed at the Croatian-Slovenian border. That's what it comes from the intergovernmental agreement from 2003. And that right was given in form of an exclusive right before we entered the European Union. Since then, that right is not exclusive right anymore, but it's still a right and is bound to physical capacity and one border. And we are well aware that this is a problem for flow-based methodology, but sorry, this is a right which still has to be somehow respected. The capacity of 350 megawatt has been offered to all parties in long-term auctions, so there is no question about discrimination anymore, as raised in one of the previous meetings. At present, the sum of the yearly and monthly capacity is 650 megawatts. To ensure non-discrimination among market participants, auctions ensure this, auction mechanisms ensure this. Although not specified in the intergovernmental agreement, but for maintaining this right, the most important is long-term time frame, which means yearly and monthly. That's why we did not raise that question at daily, day ahead and intraday capacity calculation methodologies. And that is why we requested that methodology is either amended to guarantee the right above, or the capacity of half of power of NPP Krško is excluded from flow-based calculation methodology for allocation and allocation. This is what we, how we summarize this right and what we requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the explanation. I think there is a last slide that will be presented by Acer, and then we can take questions.
Yes, indeed. So maybe to repeat here the ASOS view, we understand that interstate agreement between Slovenia and Croatia requires the transfer of these 350 megawatts. And also the fact now is that HEP from Croatia is procuring these 350 megawatts at long-term NTC-based auctions. And as Marko said, this right is no longer exclusive because they compete with other market participants on this border, so they have to bid high enough to obtain this capacity. To repeat once more that reservation of capacity for one single party is not legally allowed. It's not ensured today, nor it would be given through long-term flow-based. So it's the question of the availability of capacity to our mind, depending on a particular methodology, whether the current NTC-based or perspective flow-based. So what is needed for HEP to procure this 350 megawatts practically is that the capacity needs to be, speaking about really pure minimal conditions, that capacity at this border must be at least 350 megawatts. In a flow-based world, it's not easy to say and to speak about NTC-like capacity. So this indeed can be measured through a max BEX value calculated with from a yearly and monthly domain, but we are aware of the fact that max BEX value is theoretical, so it can be 350 megawatt. That would mean that nobody else in core does anything else, and there's only one exchange. So this definitely does not leave enough space for competition. Our assessment was, let's say, that up to 650 megawatt should be considered as a max BEX value, which would enable this 350 to be practically available. Now it's also up to DSOs to test the long-term flow-based and to see if these criteria should be fulfilled. Before the go live, it would be very beneficial to see the values of max BEX. But as it regards the real values, historical NTC's capacity, you can see on a small table I gave here, and also from simulated long-term flow-based allocation. So it's no longer max BEX, but real allocation. It seems that there is enough capacity on this border. There is a high, I mean, there are lots of tie lines. I think the sum of F max on this board is 5,000 megawatts or so. And this shows that there should be also more than sufficient capacity on this border with long-term flow-based. What I presented here from flow-based simulation is quite on the safe side because these flow-based simulations were from the NTC world, so bids were from the NTC world, so there is no competition amongst borders. So I guess that the bidders that would like to be sure about the capacity, knowing that there's a competition now not only at the border but also between borders, could bid a bit higher to make sure that this capacity is here. Also, these NTCs provided here are also higher because these are only yearly capacities. Typically, there's 150 megawatts of NTC, which corresponds to Marco's figure of 650 megawatts from the previous slide. Moreover, I was curious. I checked today max BEX values from flow-based day-ahead capacities. The max BEX for day-ahead, which speaks about connectivity of Slovenia and Croatia, is between 3.7 thousand and 2.7 to 3.4 thousand megawatts. It is day-ahead value, but it speaks about the fact that if you have 5,000 megawatts of F maxes and you have like 3,000 megawatts of max BEX value on their head level, there should be no problems also to transfer 350 megawatts on the long-term value, I mean on yearly plus monthly together. So that's the end of my slide. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Zoran. We will have some questions now. I see that in the Q&A there is already a question maybe for Marco. How does it work if Kirchko is out fully on an outage? Is there possibility to answer this question? And then I'll leave the floor after that to Davor as well.
Sorry, I did not really understand the question. Outage of nuclear power plants are a planning category, are an operational category, but we are talking now about long-term allocation of capacities. And these are two different things. So the answer is any short-term outage planning and similar does not affect the capacity, which has to be guaranteed. How this capacity is then in practice turned to reality is a question of procedures. I do not see the problem unless that's not a question for methodology. Sorry, no.
No, yeah,
Okay.
more meant in the context of this intergovernmental agreement. But no, understood. It basically just means that it's independent, completely legally, and you still offer at least 350, right?
Uh, 350 megawatts at present have to be at least offered, yes. But the problem is they are bound to a border. And here we have a problem.
No, yeah, I understand that problem. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. Davor, do you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you so much. We are speaking about physics. We are speaking about nuclear power plant that is a live origin, let's say, a live power plant. It can have a power trip. It is a rare occasion, but it can happen. Therefore, we need to consider both regulations, FCA and CACM regulations. FCA is more important, I fully agree, because we need to have reliable article and path for consuming our own energy being produced from nuclear power plant Krško, which is 50% owned and built by Croatian state, I would say. So it's joint investment. And any denial of having physical transmission like right and physical way how to transmit this energy is a way of postponing this interstate agreement, which has been brought, as Marko said, as kind of a key before Slovenia and Croatia entered European Union. And in that sense, it should be fully obeyed when the new regulations are being obtained. On the other hand, if we think that any generation from nuclear power plants could be on daily basis sold on Slovenian power exchange, at the same time bought on Croatian power exchange, I'm really feared that we can't succeed at every second of its work of this power plant, realistic transmission of that energy according to the interstate agreement. In that sense, having this issue when we don't have physical power lines anymore, we need to consider that we are speaking about energy supply risk, energy independence problem, Croatian competitiveness, economic standing, national security, regional security. Recent network incidents showed the importance of this nuclear power plant in the region. For instance, in 2021, it gave additional stability when the frequency deviated. Last year, it happened to stop the voltage issue when Southeastern Europe had a blackout. In some recent events, it really helped in stabilizing the whole power system in the region. On the other hand, it is Croatian asset. And when any other member state has that issue or problem, then they really need to defend their national needs. So when we are speaking about the new investment, then we can consider all the new obligations, all the new regulations, everything that should be considered when we speak about the new investment. We are speaking about the investment that was built in 1970s late, and the first operational work started in 1983, before power market, before any other way when we considered the regulations that might happen maybe 40 years after that new investment was put on the grid. So once again, nuclear power plant is a serious plant. We need to find reliable way how to transmit this energy in every second of its work. On long-term horizon, D-2, and all further future moments, that should be covered by FCA regulation, FCA 2.0. But also we need to consider any deviation from already allocated and submitted schedule according to FCA and long-term nominations and allocations. So we are entering into CACM regulation as well. It can deviate on D-1 stage, it can deviate on intraday level. At this moment, we are consuming both regulations, and for intraday situations, we take explicit capacities. But if we lose that opportunity in both regulations, then we might have the problem with the arbitrage of this interstate agreement. And that should be clearly stated that I think nobody in Europe, and especially in Slovenia and Croatia, wants to see that scenario.
Thank you, Davor. Thank you very much, Davor. I don't know if there is any remarks from Marco or Zoran. Otherwise, we can, just having in mind the timing, switch to maybe other questions, if that's okay. It was more, Marco, I saw that you unmuted yourself. Go ahead if you want to.
Oh, just go ahead.
Okay. But then thank you, Davor. It would be good also to like write some remarks in the minutes as well. We'll try to like, let's say, summarize a bit your remarks as well. Thank you. I see there is a question in the Q&R. Maybe that question would be for you, Steve. So I'm just, or do you want to go ahead, Steve?
Yeah, I did notice that Javier had also his hand raised from, is it on the previous point? The Croatian-Slovenian border that you wanted to show a reaction?
Yes, maybe just two short reactions also to complement what Marco said. Yes, regarding the questions for the outage of nuclear power Krško, it really matters. The problem is then in the intraday, we could say, time frame, because we need to counterbalance the positions, and then we use the intraday market to balance these positions. But in the normal situation, I want to emphasize, in normal situations, all the energy transferred during the long-term market, of course, in the direction from Slovenia to Croatia. And that's why it's very important for us still to have the physical transmission rights in the long-term market on this border. I think it is also the connection for the next topic, but I want to emphasize already now that the status of the physical transmission rights of these borders is really a must for us, for regulators. And regarding just a short reaction on the max BEX values, yes, we are all aware that it's only a theoretical value. As HERA, we support all the preconditions how the domain could be extended, of course, especially in this direction from the Slovenia to Croatia. This max BEX parameter, of course, shows what is the theoretical possibility. For this exchange, we support all the actions from the TSOs in really expanding these trading possibilities in these directions, but we are still currently not sure that it is really can be sufficient enough based on the current simulations, because as already correctly presented also by Marco and Zoran, if we want to give sufficient value capacities, not only for this specific purpose and also to other market participants for real competition, then it's really, we need to ensure a lot more available capacities. What Zoran said is also correct. We have more than 5,000 megawatt of thermal capacity, how it's said in FMAX, let's say. So we see that these all requests are not so, I would say, not realistic. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for those points. I see there is another hand raised, but I don't know if you want to intervene, Steve, before or.
No, I think it's on the same topic, so I'll let Andres go first.
Let me thank you. So just a short comment from the HOPS Croatian TSO perspective. So it is always good to look back a bit in the history. So Croatia and Slovenia was the same bidding zone. And in the past, the NTC values were really high, over 1,200 megawatts of long-term capacity, because we're really small and really well connected, as Zoran said. And somehow, when the happened when the states accepted this way of working as it is today, that it is competition, the price of capacity was zero, and there was always a lot of capacity. Now the things are changing, and I would say we have to find somehow a way how to make this possible to physically transmit this energy, because it is 15% of Croatian energy needs. So it is political issues and right from this intergovernmental agreements. So that's the goal, and I would say this could be done either by enlarging the domains, making some dedicated allocation for this, or making some exemption. We could see, I would say, almost a similar thing when German and Austrian bidding zone were splitted. So there were also some solutions there, how to attach some plants in some other zones. So maybe we can think about something about this, but solutions should be fine, because at last every megawatt hour should be evacuated from nuclear power plants somehow. And we are really small markets, both Slovenian and Croatian. Maybe from perspective of bigger market, it seems as not so big problem, but for us, it really is, I would say. Yeah, that's it from.
Thank you for those points.
Mm.
I don't know if there are further questions on the topic, or if you want to go ahead, Steve.
I will also take Arnaud's question along the way, and it comes out on this topic as well. So Arnaud's question is regarding the max BECS values. One must be careful to look when looking at the max BECS values across the borders, because these are maximum theoretical values, indeed, often not realistic market situations, understood. And secondly, they are not simultaneously feasible. How are TSOs planning to consider this aspect? And I think here on the slide, we are touching upon it with the example of the Croatian-Slovenian border. And it's this example that also created some confusion and further questions between the TSOs. So I will try here to clarify, and I will also need your reaction on that, Zoran. So indeed, a benchmark, in my understanding, it's simultaneously reachable values. And so when the benchmark has been set up and the 350 megawatt, this is to be simultaneously reachable, knowing that there is competition in the allocation. And in addition, because we are looking here at this specific interstate agreement, on this specific border, we wanted to have an expression of a buffer above this benchmark, such that you take into account the competition effect, to say, okay, it cannot be just 350 megawatt coming out of the flow-based domain, because then there is, as Zoran explained, zero chance of competition taking place. So the way how to measure what can come out of the flow-based domain in case no competition takes place, that is a max BECS KPI. But the max BECS KPI as such is not, let's say, the historical benchmark. I think that should be the difference between that you should clarify that there are two ways of measuring the flow-based domain. We need to look at how things simultaneously fit together, and then with the max BECS KPI, we need to understand if the market party would bid very high prices and win the competition, how much it can get out of it. I'm not sure, Zoran, if the way how I try to summarize it here is fully clear to you. But could you come back on this point, maybe comment some further?
Not sure that I completely understood you, but yeah, maybe to confirm that none of us actually think that max BEX is the value to be firmly based on. It stays as indicator. To my mind, it's on the TSOs to analyze and to provide further long-term flow-based simulations with real bids, with real market situation, with simultaneous, with the result, which is of course simultaneously feasible. Then we can focus on the Slovenia-Croatia border and see if it's sufficient or not. My gut feeling is that coming back to max BEX, if we see some thousands, then we should not be worried that there is no sufficient capacity, because it is still an indicator of possibility, and if it's quite stable above the minimum value, I think it should be sufficient. But it's indeed now on TSOs to test a bit more and to see for different bidding strategies for different years and different capacities, whether there's sufficient capacity here on this border.
Okay. So I understand this as indeed a confirmation that the benchmark is simultaneous, and that in that context, the 350 megawatt is an input, just like we had input from all the other borders to be fit into a flow-based domain. And that in addition, to measure how much buffer there is with respect to the competition effect, the max BEX KPI presents this complementary information. And that for this particular border, it's of a special interest due to the situation explained here.
Indeed. Yeah, so we can connect max BEX as a theoretical value with flow-based simulated real simultaneous allocation. And for example, we see that 600 on flow-based simulation means 1.5 thousand of max BEX, something like that, to get a better feeling. So what I would propose first, maybe to TSOs go back to their simulations and calculate max BEX for these recent simulations that you made for 2024 to have a better insight. Because I use day ahead values. They are promising, but they're still day ahead.
Okay. The max BEX KPI is part of our KPI assessment. Mm-hmm. I will need to look at Patricia to confirm if 2024 is part of a data set, or if meanwhile we already switched to 2025.
Currently, we are assessing both, because I think it is also good to understand how the inputs change from one year to another, and what is then the impact on the domains. But we should have a vast data set, and as said, the KPI for max BEX is a standardized part of the assessment.
One additional point, maybe, because we expressed an expectation regarding using real bits, as TSOs in all the allocation works. I think we have to accept that this kind of a limitation. Allocation simulations are performed using historical bits or normalized bits, but we would not be in a position for us to claim that this is the exact bidding behavior that the market will display on the flow-based allocation. So I think that any simulations that come along with allocation will come along with this disclaimer. So I see Zeli also nodding here.
Yeah.
And I'm nodding as well. That we also had as an issue, and you see here also that I said that the bids are from the NTC world. This is inevitable. However, maybe you can play a bit with a single bid on Slovenia, Croatia. Fine. There's, I think, not an exact bid of 350, but you can find something like that and play a bit with giving a higher bid value or a lower bid value to see what happens in a certain sensitivity analysis.
Okay. That's an idea to explore further then, yes.
Yeah. I would also say here that it is not the LTCC necessarily who would do it, but in alignment with the LTFPA project where the simulations on allocations are currently ongoing.
Yep.
Oh. Okay, thank you very much for the precision and for writing down the minutes and the actions. I see that we are already 5 minutes behind. I see that Davor, you also wants to maybe take the floor. Could I ask you to be very concise and to the point, please? Thank you. Go ahead.
Please, when you make simulations, don't only refer to historical values. You need to consider the evolution of renewables in the region, the evolution of the behavior of Western Balkan region, because it's still not being calculated. It's not being part of the core region. The behavior of the whole Italian peninsula, Greece, Romania, the whole Southeastern Europe will probably behave a bit more dramatically and in the same time considering and taking this available capacity for their needs as well. And Croatia and Slovenia are both countries, they are being on the bridge between Western Europe and Southeastern Europe. And those new requirements regarding the balancing purposes, ancillary services, and the renewables behavior really will probably consume most of the available capacity. We need to consider available lifespan of the nuclear power plant. That is 2045, 46, 43 at least.
Thank you very much, Davor. And
you.
yeah, clear for taking into account all those externalities, let's say. Maybe this could also be written in the minutes as well. So I think if I'm just checking it in the Q&A, I don't think there are further questions. But go ahead, Steve. Otherwise, I think we can switch to the other topic.
Yeah. Just on this last point to manage expectations, I don't think we will model expected or forecasted market party bidding strategies in 2040 in a sensitivity analysis. So let's see what we can do with a sensitive analysis on this border by changing a bit the bits, but I would not claim that we would look at the 2040 energy mix and try to do such sophisticated studies. I think it will take us a bit too far, but we are okay to look into understanding the effect of bidding and sensitivity. Yes, I think looking at the Q&A, that indeed all questions have been addressed now. And we can close this topic here and move on with an actually connected topic, which is the impact of the removal of LTA inclusion on the day-ahead capacities. And this will be presented by Reinhard.
Thanks, Steve. Billy, just looking at you, did you want to give an intro statement? If not, then fine.
No, we can have maybe a discussion after your slides
Okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks a lot. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Steve mentioned, connected to the previous discussion, here a first impact assessment on what it would mean to turn off LTA inclusion in the day ahead timeframe. This is a topic that is coming as an upcoming request for amendment to the core day ahead CCM, next to a few other topics that we added in one of the following slides as a pre-read. So we would not want to discuss those in detail today, but focus on this one. Yeah, roughly the expected timeline also for the upcoming fourth RFA of the core day ahead CCM is that in September, October this year, we would run the public consultation via the ENTSO-E website, and then in early December, submit the RFA to core NRAs for the approval process. And the objectives for today here are on the one hand, to generally make you aware of this fourth request for amendment, then to present the first considerations around removing LTA inclusion from the core day-ahead capacity calculation, in particular the impact on the cross-zone capacities in the day-ahead timeframe, as well as give an ad hoc update on AHC, especially given the recent developments on MCSC SDOC side. So with that, we can go to the next slide. On the background, today we perform LTA inclusion by means of extended LTA inclusion. This means that both the day-ahead flow-based domain as well as the long-term allocated domain are provided to SDOC/Euphemia, and during allocation, both domains are used to maximize socioeconomic welfare, and whatever domain gives more capacity in the market clearing point is ultimately also binding as long as there's price divergence. The removal of LTA inclusion has been a fundamental assumption in the exchanges between Acer and ENTSO-E on the revised forward market design with the keyword FCA 2.0. So there's also the driver coming from that direction. And then for core, the main purpose is to decouple the LTCC, which we just discussed, from operational security and all subsequent processes. And this goes together with the request to enlarge the flow-based domain in the long-term time frame to, among others, allow sufficient capacities on Slovenian-Croatian border and so forth. Now, the high-level considerations around the removal of LTA inclusion are twofold. On the one hand, we need to replace the role of the LTA currently in backup capacities. So the default flow-based parameters, on the one hand, when the core day-ahead capacity calculation process fails, but as well as for the shadow auction NTCs, which would be relevant in case there's a decoupling in SDOC. And then the second point is to ensure a minimum level of cross-zone capacities in happy flow. So meaning again here that the core day-ahead process runs as expected, and after such a run that the volume that is offered to SDOC is sufficiently large. Together with PTRs, we have the long-term nomination shift, which is currently performed in the final computation stage of the core day-ahead capacity calculation process. And this is expected to be eliminated and goes together with the assumption that the biddings on board Slovenia and Croatia also switches to FDRs. And the turning off of LTA inclusion would be put in operation in conjunction with the go live of long-term flow-based capacity allocation end of next year. And also, as in case with LTCC, historical political agreements in terms of LTAs and their size, volume would cease to exist. Now, the main affected sections in the core day-ahead CCM quickly are three articles. So Article 18 in general on LTA inclusion, which describes how the process is to be dealt with during capacity calculation in happy flow. Then for the day-ahead capacity calculation fallback, so this will be tackling the DFPs, and then the ATCs for SDOC fallback, so the shadow auction NTCs in case of SDOC decoupling. And other articles that refer to these would potentially also be affected. But these are the main ones that we're looking at right now. Good. With this more being an intro, any first questions on this before we head into the analysis? I see a hand from, is it Jorge? Yeah, please.
Yes, thank you, Reinhard, for presenting this topic. Yes, we as Core and Race had a chance first to, let's say, first high-level insight to this topic only 1 month, 1.5 months. So it's a rather, let's say, very fresh topic for us. And basically, I have two remarks only on the behalf of HERA. so it is not coordinated remarks. So first remark is that we do not support as one of the considerations, which is said here, transfer from the physical transmission rights to the financial transmission rights on Croatian-Slovenia border, which was already expressed in the last topic. It is the really long-term capacities are currently the only way how this intergovernmental agreement functions, basically. So basically all the stories that we held maybe 15 minutes ago, the precondition is that we have physical transmission rights on the border between Slovenia and Croatia. So I think we need to emphasize this, that HERA is strictly against this switch. Also, if I'm not wrong, it is not only that Croatian-Slovenia border is physical transmission rights for this, but also Romania and Bulgaria border is also important for this switch, because when we go to the advanced hybrid coupling, this border is also affected, and it is even not in core. The methodology where the type of the long-term transmission rights are presented is basically the regional design of the long-term transmission rights. So it is not even given. You can even decide on this switch. We have a special methodology for this purpose. So all in all, I want to emphasize again that if this is the precondition for this amendment, that HERA is strictly against it. And one additional comment, yes, for the Germany and Austria border, what is written that is consideration that this political agreement will cease to exist. Yes, we already tackled this. We are aware when there will be a coordinated regional methodology that basically this is not an issue anymore. Yes, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Acknowledged, I think, and you're right, with core advanced hybrid coupling, the Romanian-Bulgarian border plays a similar role. For the development of alternatives for the role of LTAs today in the day-ahead process, the assumption is still that we do have FTRs, because it was also concluded that if we keep PTRs, we cannot turn off LTA inclusion. As we would exactly not do what we want to do, namely to break the link between LTCC and DAHCC in terms of operational security. Steve, please.
Yeah, I think we need to nuance this here. So we can, for me, look at the removal of, or have to look at the removal of LTA inclusion without taking for granted that there will only be FTR borders. So I think Rovi made his point quite clear about their positioning. You have the Romanian-Bulgarian border, and so that determines that the solution to look for in the day-ahead capacity calculation is about representing what is the impact of these physical flows that come from these PTRs. And then if you account for these physical flows, what is the remaining capacity left for the flow-based domain and day-ahead exchanges? So I think it's connected in that sense, that we need to understand what this impact is. And then have a discussion on if the impact is too significant, what can be done to ensure that there is sufficient capacity remaining for the day-ahead exchanges. Is that shaping the problem statement under PTR context correctly, Reinhard?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, then let's move on to the analysis that we prepared. So quickly, Brent, if you could jump back to the last slide just to explain a bit what the analysis is based on. So we compared 4 cases in the end in terms of min-max net positions, the 24 historic day-ahead flow-based domains with and without LTA, And then we created a post-26 scenario with the AMR or the RAM being adjusted to full 70% compliance, and then again distinguish between a case with and without the LTAs. And note also for this post-26 scenario, the historic individual validation adjustments were not carried forward, so they were ignored. As a second batch of analysis, we looked into the alpha factor, one of the outputs of euphemia that tells us what share of the LTA domain / Flowbiz domain has been used in the allocation and was present in the market clearing point. And then for the data set itself, we used Flowbiz domains, LTAs, alpha factors, IVAs from 4 in case of IVA fallback, as well as DFP and spanning. With this in mind, the LTAs are still reflecting historic values here, of course. Then for the post-26, as mentioned, we don't have IVAs, so we have an upper bound that we're going to see here. Then we recomputed the min-max net positions for the 4 cases. And in terms of data sets, we distinguished then 2 cases. First, we took out the days or hours with default Flowbiz parameters, which were 25 hours and 8 with spanning. And we separated then cases with IVA fallback, so when at least one core TSO triggered IVA fallback. And note that in 24 we had a series of IVA fallbacks by RTE, especially during the spring of last year. So those are all bundled in this data set that is roughly comprising of 1,000 MTUs, and then the happy flow data set, which comprises of the rest of the MTUs, which is close to 8,000. And I see a hand up by Arno. No, please shoot.
Yes, hello. Just a quick remark on the exclusion of the DFP hours in your analysis. I mean, I think at this point it makes complete sense because there is no alternative that has been already agreed. But I think when there is one, I would argue that in fact we should be looking at the DFP days probably with more care than the regular days when we consider this removing of LTA, especially the days where we have this fallback. These are singularities that are very costly in terms of welfare losses and so on. And if I think the new solution of the fallback deteriorates even more the capacity or shifts it around, it might be a bit of an issue. So I think we should be also looking at the DFP days as soon as we have an alternative that has been agreed. Thank you.
Indeed, I mean, the DFPs for the statistical assessment shouldn't play a big role because, you know, we look at the data of 1 year, but the DFPs today roughly constitute the LTAs. So you can do the math, I think, based on the LTA data that's published if you wanted to. But indeed, for the statistical assessment, we did take it out. Okay, if we then move on to the next slide, which gives us now the average min-max net positions for all core bidding zones for the 4 depicted cases. So we have in a light shade of blue the 24 historic flow-based domain alone. Then the darker shade of blue, flow-based domain plus LTA. So these are the values that you found on Java as well. Then in the lighter red, the post-26 flow-based domain without LTA, and then in the darker shade of red, the post-26 flow-based domain plus LTA. What we do find here is that the LTAs do not affect the min-max net positions except for Austria, even with the 26 cases. We still see that there is an impact both in the max and min direction. For all other bidding zones, there is no impact. And again, just to mention it, that for 26, it's an upper bound that we see here because there is no validation adjustments considered. So with this as a baseline, I would like to move on to the next slid, which now shows us the lowest max and the highest min net position in case of IVA happy flow. So when no TSO triggered an IVA fallback, this is what we saw in 24 historically. And the light blue is what would have come out of the flow-based domain alone, which is again not published on JAO, but the dark blue ones are individual values that you will also find back on the JAO website. And here we do see that the LTA supports the exchange capacities, in particular for Austria, again, but also for Germany, and in the export direction also for Croatia, Hungary, and the Netherlands. Other than that, we do not see a difference between those two cases. And bear in mind, these are now with regular IVAs, so not any fallbacks. If we now jump to the next slide, we look at a comparison between the first two graphs. So we now look, but only historic data. So the 24 flow-based domain and plus LTAs, so the dark blue and light blue shade bars are again what we saw 2 slides ago. So the min-max net positions. And then with those whiskers, we now see indicated the values we saw on the previous slide. So the min-max net positions with IVA happy flow. So whenever IVAs cut down on the capacities the most, and we do see quite a difference here in terms of available cross-zone capacity. Bear in mind that, of course, the whiskers here that give the indication on the lowest max and highest min in case of IVA application are not simultaneously feasible. So these are really picked across the year at the timestamps where the lowest, respectively highest values were present. Okay, and if we then move to the next slide, we add another layer to this. And now those red whiskers give us the highest min and the lowest max net position in case of IVA fallback. So when at least one TSO applied IVA fallback, and we see here the larger discrepancies for Germany and France, to a lesser extent Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and also Belgium, and then to an even lesser extent the other bidding zones. The variations here do roughly correspond with what we see for IVA happy flow, again, except for Germany and France, where also the ultimate magnitude of the min-max net positions, of course, is at a different scale as it is for the other bidding zones. So from this, we take that indeed we need a new, call it safeguard, for a good level of cross-zone capacities in happy flow. So this role of the LTAs that we have today will have to be redefined and have to be put on new footing. This is what we are currently working on to come forward with a concept on this. If we then move on to the next slide, and I believe from market participant side, there was a similar analysis provided in the questions shared up front. The distribution of the alpha factor, and as a reminder, the alpha factor is 0 when the LTA domain alone is used, and is 1 when only the flow-based domain is used. And then we have shades in between, which we here grouped in 20% or 0.2 steps. And we distinguished again here the data set with no IVA fallback, so the close to 8,000 MTUs, and the IVA fallback. Now, overall, we see that the flow-based domain is to a larger extent used for allocation. The LTA domain to a lot less, and only the LTA domain in very, very few cases. What we also see and what came out of the separation of these data sets was in case of IVA fallback, we still see a similar distribution of the alpha factor. So even when at least one TSO applied an IVA fallback, we did not immediately see that the LTA domain was only used, but roughly the red bars here show a similar pattern as the blue ones. So for both data sets with IVA fallback and without IVA fallback, we do see similar trends. So there does not seem to be an indication that in case of IVA fallbacks, even today, the LTAs come immediately to the rescue and offer a much larger set of capacities.
Excuse me.
Yeah, please.
Can you redo the same on the 25 datasets? Because even assuming that it's linked to IVA, if you look at the alpha factor that is used on a daily basis, you see that I don't think there's been a day recently where you've got alpha factor equal 1 on all hours. So
Yeah.
typically you've got 8 hours that have alpha factor.
Yeah, I think there's no harm in updating those figures with 25 data. Of course, it won't be the whole year yet, but yeah, I don't think that's an issue per se. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Good. This was it on the impact assessment on removal of LTA inclusion in terms of day-ahead capacities. Any other questions before we move on to the status update on advanced fabric coupling?
There is a hand raise from Arnaud and then Steve as well. So maybe Arnaud, you can take the floor.
Yes, thanks. So Arnaud from NG again. Just also to complement what Eric said. So I think the bucketing that you're using here might be somewhat of a mislead, especially on the flow-based domain only section. I think mathematically, you can see it as soon as you have the alpha factor strictly below 1, you have the LTA literally helping to increase social welfare and find the optimal clearing point. So it's true that when you look at the maximum extremum of the domains, it doesn't maybe move always as much on 2024, but when you plot in fact the entire duration curve of the alpha factor, what you notice is 40% of the hours you have at least a partial influence of the LTA, which increases social welfare or conversely reduces system costs. So for me it's far from being only the flow-based domain that is being used. I think what would be useful though is it's true that if we project ourselves in 2026, we'll have increased min RAM, so that's one factor that tends to reduce a bit the influence of that. Now, I think what you did is also exclude completely the IVAs. I would say that that's a fairly strong assumption. What we've seen in the past is usually IVA levels tended to correlate as we increase higher min RAMs. So even actually applying 2024 IVA levels would be probably a higher bound. But then on the other hand, you have the reduction 50% on the ATDE LTA. So you have a bit like 3 factors that balance each other. And I think it's difficult to really draw strong conclusions until we've basically tried with these 3 changes to recompute the alpha factors and see does it really impact the market or not going forwards. That's a bit my reading of the data, but happy to discuss.
Yeah, because actually it's the same question when I looked at the result. I was wondering, you're looking at the use of alpha when you're computing the min-max position. You're not looking at the alpha at optimal point, are you? I mean, from the market perspective, and the clearing point, you are not interested in alpha.
No, of course not. But for 26, we also cannot do that because we don't have a market result for that. And so the analysis here focuses purely on the impact on capacities. The min-max net positions are one KPI for this. For this, we did try to make a solid comparison between, again, flow-based domain without the LTA and then with the superposition of the LTA. And this, I think, is still pretty reliable. And then to carry forward the IVAs historically, would it also not be serious. So we fully acknowledge the disclaimer and the drawback that it's an upper bound, but to rerun validations for a whole year, etc., would be blowing up the efforts that would have to go in such a study. And yeah, we're also in the short time that we prepared this on not feasible. So with that in mind,
Okay,
I think it's a compromise, but I think we can take back the point on working on the visualization of the alpha factor, like Arnaud suggested to.
Okay, so in terms of things you can do which are not super complicated, basically you can change a bit, you can impose some constraint on some countries, because when you compute min-max position, basically you set, you have no constraint on any variable apart from the domain. And if you realize that some countries cannot export more than, say, 4 gig in some areas, then the conclusion will be slightly different. You will see that the LTA is used a little bit more. But for that, you need to change the formulation a bit. You need to acknowledge min and max natural physical position of some countries.
Acknowledged. Indeed, the point was, again, to compare capacities and also to make it relatable to what is published. And the published KPI, the min-max net positions, are computed as presented here. And then, you know, if we introduce certain heuristics like you're proposing, then we would have a discussion on what those will be. So the min-max net positions do have quite some drawbacks, fully acknowledged, but at least they operate on a level playing field. And yeah, with that in mind, I hope it still gives some insights on what can be expected. And again, we did use public data, so it's or data that's also publicly available. So from that perspective, it could also be replicated by anybody interested. Then let's see, Steve, please.
Yeah, two perspectives for me are important to add into this debate, because it's not our objective to say we will have a fully equivalent dead cross-zonal capacities with and without LTA inclusion, because it's not the same, it's not the right counterfactual. So these are historical, non-coordinated bilateral values. 2 points on that. One, the benchmark is not the same. It's lower. You mentioned it yourself, German-Austria border as an example. Secondly, we know that from the discussions that we had until now with LTCC, that it will be more difficult to reach bigger flow-based domain LTCC when keeping LTA inclusion than when removing LTA inclusion, because it's exactly the operational security aspect in a coordinated way that would articulate itself during the LTCC process already. So we have to be mindful about which counterfactual we are talking about. So for me, that's one important perspective in this discussion. And the second one is on the what's the principal role of LTAs to provide sufficient cross-zonal capacities. It should not be the principal role of the LTA. That should be coming out of the flow-based domain itself. So all the regulation is prescribed in that way, with its limitations, with its complexities. Okay, it is what it is, but we do have the 70%, we do have validations and so forward. So this should really be the basis upon which we navigate the cross-zonal capacities for DAT. And LTA inclusion is coming from a long history where in the past we did not have such minimum capacity requirements. We did not have a 70%, we did not have a 20%. And the LTA inclusion was really a much needed band-aid in order to have some capacity coming out of a grid model which was of inferior data quality, and make sure that the revenue adequacy added up. So I think with these two perspectives, the role and the need for LTA inclusion in the future should be looked at differently than it has been looked at in the past 5 to 10 years. And we should not be dependent on it for the day-ahead market, in my perspective. Zoran, you also had your hand raised. Maybe you want to confirm or bring some further nuance.
Yeah, actually, you covered what I wanted to say. For your first point is what I wanted to say, and I agree with your second point as well about the role nature of LTA inclusion, reasons for it to exist. It's not to save the day-ahead domain. But for the first one, indeed, these calculations are based on the historical non-coordinated domains. Once we have a hopefully soon long-term flow-based allocation, the long-term domain should not peak out from the day-ahead domain, and then the role of LTA inclusion would be even smaller. But you said it all, so I can just conclude and confirm.
Thanks.
So I think despite these limitations and changing perspectives, as Reinhard, as you phrased it, we present kind of an upper bound with the LTA inclusion to get a feeling in terms of the trends and to get comfort that the capacities that come out, the cross-border capacity the day ahead, are reasonable. So I think it's important that we align on that objective, that we not try to mimic exactly the history here.
Okay. Thanks. Then I suggest we move on to the status update on advanced recoupling. So quickly on the background, as per second amendment of the core day-ahead CCM, core TSOs are to be ready with the implementation of AHC on the capacity calculation side by March 31st this year. Then there was the requirement to update the explanatory note that went together with this amendment, and then have published an analysis on the impacts so that market participants can understand the impact of AHC, and also that by June 30th this year have AHC implemented in terms of allocation as well, and then this being readiness to this being subject to readiness of STAC. Now on this, on the first point, so we have carried out 3 spike leg runs in the past that we've also discussed extensively with you, also on the input data. The 4th run is now ongoing and is expected, the report associated with it is expected to be published by end of Q2. And in terms of implementation for HC on the capacity calculation side, we consider the timeline met as the tooling was ready and had been shown with the spike leg runs. Now, after the announcement on the delay of the 15-minute MTU go live a few weeks ago, we have requested an update from STAC MCSC on the impact on the planning for the go live of core HC. So far, no official feedback has been received, but it can be mentioned that in the next days, MCSC will make a communication, at least towards ACER and arrays on this, and that soon after. There will also be publicly available information, but so far we have not received any update on this. What we can, however, conclude is that a core HC go live in 25 is infeasible now, because after the 15-minute MTU go live, which is now set for 30th of September, we would, the PCR NEMOs would want to test the euphemia performance with live 15-minute MTU data, and watch the performance of euphemia for at least 3 months before they would grant us the green light, so to say, to go live with Core HC. And then we would be in the Christmas period, which is not a time when you want to put live such a process. So realistically, we are now looking rather into Q2 next year. And yeah, this only being an outlook, and again, subject to the ultimate goal live of 50 million MTU still this year, and then that Euphemia shows adequate performance with 50 million MTU order books. Good. Any questions on this? Yeah, if not, then thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for these updates, Reinhard. Yeah, we added it in as we got the question if we could say already more about it. So this is what we know today, what we can share, and then I'm pretty sure that there will be further updates coming, as also MCSE will provide future updates. Maybe one point, it's not part of the presentation, but you may have seen meanwhile that we shared with you a follow-up on the default progress parameter incident that occurred last week in the capacity calculation. So we analyzed what was causing it. We've put the fixes in place, and we've sent the explanation around via the core CG distribution list. So in case you were wondering about that situation, you can find more information in that communication. I think with that, we are through the day-ahead part of Reinhard. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I can present this topic from the NRA's perspective. Okay, so there was a question. What will happen with the derogations for the 70% starting from basically next year? Because we are all aware that the electricity regulation says that the action plans are basically ending at the end of 25, but it doesn't say anything about the derogation. So there were meetings, we exchanged views, core NRAs together with the ACER and European Commission, and there are some statements which you can already find in these slides. But just to explain what is the background and how we ended with this conclusion. So the existing solution is that we are aware that there is no currently coordinated validation in the core region. Also, we are aware that the structural congestions will not disappear on short term because some of the investment projects that are foreseen as measures in the action plans are not yet finalized. We know that there are grid situations where there are insufficient remedial actions that can be used by the TSO to fulfill the 70% target. Also, regarding the legal background, we know that this issue is covered in the regulation 9 from the 2019-943, so electricity regulation. So the starting point for discussion about the derogation is the same. So it is the legal text in the regulation. Regarding the granting or reviewing the derogations, we are of the same positions that it is at the NRA's level. And if there is a disagreement between the NRAs, this case will be transferred to the ACER for approval. What is the difference in respect to the legality, you could say, or to compare before 26, it's basically that if derogation is being applied after December 2025, because we know from the start of the 2026 70% target is binding, the derogation is a recognition that the respective TSO cannot comply with the 70% target. And the fact that the member state does not comply with the 70% target means that the basically member state is not complying. And so that means that TSOs should clearly state that by complying with the 70% requirement, they are unable to safely operate the grid. So all in all, the conclusions are that taking into account the current status, where the ROSC and cost sharing, these methodologies are delayed to the 2029, and this does not enable that ROSC assures both system security and the 70% requirement. So the final conclusion is that it is possible to issue derogations also, we could say, from the next year, but they should be strictly for ensuring operational security while ensuring there is no discrimination between internal and cross-zonal exchanges, and derogation requests shall include the necessary justification and the tariff analysis. So in a nutshell, it is possible also to issue the derogation the next year, but of course, as also in the past, it should be really focused on guaranteeing the on system operation, system security, and also not to make any discrimination between internal and cross-zonal exchanges.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions there? I see one question. Davo?
Thank you, Hervé, for clarifying this conclusion. So on the one hand, we say it's binding for everybody, and on the other hand, we say it's not so binding if we can, let's say, prove that security issue is priority. On the other hand, on the third hand, is there any obligation for those TSOs who prove that really those CNECs represent internal constraint that they should build the new power line in decent timeline in order to avoid internal congestion and to allow this 70% obligation to be legally fulfilled?
Just a quick response. Yes, if TSOs would like to issue derogation or send a request, of course, for derogation, they should present a tariff analysis. It is what was also currently being done in the core region. And also one part of this request or this documentation is how to present the mitigation measures for it. I suppose that, of course, the most efficient is sometimes, of course, to extend the network, but there are also some other measures. For example, if you need to enable the more remedial actions and coordinate them, then it is also one way how to mitigate the problems.
Thank you.
Michael, I think you want to bring some nuance to that question.
Yeah, well, because it's there's a technical justification is needed, ex ante, but also ex post. I mean, I just don't want to have a derogation, but afterwards it has to be shown that the derogation was really necessary, and that all available measures, costly and non-costly, were taken into account to avoid that you have to ask for a derogation. And so it's really, at some point, it was very clear, minimum 70% MinRAM, and it's either you build, you split, or you pay, in a nutshell. And so then here the thing is if you don't want to split and you didn't build in time, then you will have to pay. So it also includes costly remedial actions, and not just saying operational security is in danger, but showing that you have taken all available possible measures and then after all that, there was still an operational security issue. To be very clear about that. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but it's in any case for industrial consumers, it is very important that we go towards market integration and not market coupling. And so that after 2026, which is already many years after minimum 70% minimum was introduced, that it is really there and not being hollowed out all the time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Does anybody want to comment back on that? Steve?
Yes. It's good that you make the link with build, split, and pay, because indeed, depending on what is driving the congestions and operational security concern, not every of these three measures can be applied by every TSO. I can only speak for our case, which I know very well. In Belgium, we indeed have a derogation. We explain the reasons for operational security. It's linked to what also Javier explained with the redispatch, the coordinated redispatch across borders, that methodologies that are not yet implemented, and the way how the cost sharing is being settled around that. So I think keeping that perspective in mind, that's indeed a good one to look at the justification for the derogations.
Steve, if I can react, and I happen to know the case that you mentioned quite well too, both being from Belgium. But then there is a clear end to when you need the derogation. And so if some of the procedures are in place, the derogation will be void.
Absolutely.
And so there is a timeline. The timeline is sliding. Okay, I mean, we've discussed this today. You show timelines, and if you show the slides from 2 years ago, it's still always Fata Morgana 2 years in the future, but at some point it will be there, and then there will be no argumentation. What I want to avoid is that somebody asks for a derogation for operational security. I want it to be proven that it's really there, and that measures are being taken. And of course, it's saying build, split, or pay. You could add or take the necessary measures to avoid that the thing exists. But in the end, that was not what was in CACM included in the beginning, and was not the sense of the regulation. But for me, that's fine. But then there should be an end point, and not asking for derogations year after year after year without any clear view when this will be solved. And when it will be solved should also not be decades in the future. And so there should be a clear limit on what can be done, because when I look at the target model, it was introduced in 2014, should have been implemented a decade ago. And so we now have at best market coupling. If you look at the results, Bernard was showing some things this morning, I did not react, but it is not full market integration. It is better coupling than before, but it's not market integration.
Yeah. Michiel, Davor?
Yes, I just wanted to add that we have congestion rent. And for us, market participants, this is a cost, a huge cost that has been being paid for many decades. Maybe for TSOs, this is an income. And we need to have strict line that every income that comes from the congestion rent should be on the accountant level fully put only for building the new lines, for solving physically the crack. And I'm not sure that it has been done in reality. Most of that money has been already spent for remedial actions, unfortunately. And that doesn't build the new line. It doesn't solve on long term the problem. It just slides the problem, as colleague from Belgium mentioned.
Steve, you want to react, and then Michiel again.
Yes, so indeed, what is needed to not have to resort to the derogation anymore has to be clear. There's even a requirement that it's followed up, so that there is a progress reporting on what are the measures, methodologies, or other measures, and their implementation status. So for me, it's fully part of the framework for the derogations. Just to confirm your expectation, your position, Michael.
Thank you, Steve. To react also a bit to Davor, I understand Davor's question. Congestion income can only be used for a certain limited subset of purposes, and one of them can also be lowering grid tariffs. So as consumers, we pay a lot of grid tariffs. It's sometimes also nice not to invest in extra lines, which is extra capex and extra revenues for TSOs, but just using it also to reduce the cost and to avoid that we build a copper plate that is underused. And so there's a certain point, the sweet spot where you don't want to build extra lines because the added value is not there and your cost benefit analysis is not necessarily positive. And in that case, it is clear that you should not build extra lines, but that you should lower the tariffs for the consumers who pay for that. But for the rest, I understand what you're saying. So the point is that the solution is there and that there's a future-proof and comprehensive solution in place and not just asking for derogation after derogation after derogation. And in the meantime, just spending money on remedial actions, which I understand from your point of view, that is indeed not a very future-proof solution. And so you need to have something in place that in the future solves it and goes towards market integration. I can only repeat this. This is the reason why we're all doing this. Not to build lines for TSOs, not to have you all doing nice projects and studies, but to ensure that we have full market integration in Europe to the benefit of consumers and society who pay for all of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody want to react or? No. Well, thank you everyone for that. I think there were any actions from that to record, so I think we can move on to the next next part of the agenda.
Yeah. So thanks again, Javier, for having picked up this action point on NRA side and having aligned with the Commission. I think it was a very important one to have had clarity upon. So thanks again for that. Yeah, we are to our agenda for today. Nice on time. It's 4:30 here. So we have a next consultative group meeting planned on the 15th of October. I think we can already say long term will be a topic on the agenda. A follow-up on the LTA inclusion will be on the agenda. As usual, there is some preparatory timeline, so there's also the room to align on market party side with respect to topics to propose. It doesn't necessarily have to be right now, but if there is an ideal question already, I see, Michael, you want to maybe raise one?
Yeah, the comment on the date, you should have checked because that's also the date that is proposed for the MESC, the 15th of October. So you should check if there's no overlap there, because I have a meeting request for a MESC for that day. So maybe just to I mean,
thanks for notifying. We will. Yeah, we will take it as an action point to align with Celi because it's not a purpose that you have to split yourself in two to attend both.
Well, you would have to do the same, Steve. So we would both be split into. But no, but it's just check with ENTSO-E on that one for the secretariat, maybe. Thank you.
It's also the intention to have the next one, the 15th of October, should that date change, be in person as a result of the one in Munich being cancelled.
Exactly. So we will need to refine then the date to make sure it fits the other European agenda. Anything else to add?
On my side, yes, maybe. Thank you very much for the discussion. Maybe, Michael, you have another point. Go ahead.
Just one. 15th of October or whatever date after the 30th of June would be nice to see where we are with all the action plans and derogations, to have a clear overview where we are, because everybody needs to bring a report by end of month 6 and to see where we're heading for end of month 12 and who will be in breach of the obligation. would be very nice to have that overview. And I know that everybody has to bring reports by the 30th of June, so it could be nice to have an overview of that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I see it's written as potential topics, so it's taken on board. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, can we make it a bit more explicit? When you say status where we are, I know what I said before, it's about the implementation progress of what is needed to not need the derogations anymore. It's that you refer to. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's who is ready for 70%, minimum 70%, and who is not and is planning to do a derogation, because by that time, 15th of October, the derogation should have been requested. So there should be a full overview available by then.
Okay, so there are these two aspects, duly noted, and I think the second aspect, indeed we will align with NRAs as the process is a coordinated process amongst them, so any request should indeed feed into a central overview.
We might not have decisions of NRAs, but should at least the first steps should have been initiated, so that should be available by mid-October.
Okay.
All right, so just to conclude on my side, thank you very much for all the questions, for the discussion, and also thank you to core TSOs for taking into account the question we sent up front. I encourage also market participants to send me questions, and if you also want to have potential topics for the next core CG, so we can then discuss them with Lorcan and Steve afterwards, before the next core CG. Maybe also I remind that there will be minutes, and there were actions that were taken written down. So just as a bit of actions that we thought about, like on having maybe of course like feedback or like being warned when there will be amendment to IDCC as well. So for coming from the capacity improvement studies. So this, all of that, so I think it was taken clearly. And maybe, so not for IDCC, but for long-term capacity calculation, I would believe that some market participants will also like to give further feedback also for day-ahead capacity calculation with the LTA inclusion removal. And I would want to ask if that would be possible to also provide further feedback by written to you, Steve and Lorcan, on those points, because I think there are still a bit discussions, and especially knowing that the process is a bit rolling at the moment. And if I understood well, there would be maybe not modification on the studies that were conducted for LTA before having the amendment proposed in October 2025. So between this and then, let's say, it'd be good to maintain, discussions with market participants. So we are ensuring that, points are taken on board for having an impact assessment that would be relevant for before having the amendment proposed in October, before the consultation as well. I don't know if it's a point that we can take as well.
Yes, so I understand that you will deliver us additional input on the topic of removal of LTA inclusion, and then we can connect it to the public consultation. So let's take it step by step. Let's have your inputs, questions, requests, and then we can communicate back on how we are approaching it. It will help us also to prepare the public consultation. So that's positive for me.
Okay, great. So let's take that then. Thank you very much. And I think that's it on my side as well. Thank you for the discussion.
Would it be possible for you to do that before the summer break kicks in?
How do you qualify the summer break? Before August or before July?
I'll let you decide.
Let's say, okay, we are the 27th of May. Okay, let's try to do before July, so we have a month to provide for feedback on LTA inclusion removal and perhaps other feedback. Is that okay for you?
Yes.
Okay, then it's noted. Deadline, let's say. So I encourage market participants who want to provide for feedback to contact me as well, so we can coordinate to make a bit the life of courtiers so easier to get the feedback on this topic, if you don't mind. Thank you for taking that into the actions.
Okay. Then we are through our CG for today. Thanks a lot for your attention, the questions, the good questions, and yeah, it allowed us to keep also the timings as expected. So I think it went rather smooth today. If we don't see you anymore, then we wish you already a pleasant upcoming summer. And we will for sure hear each other back after the summer period. Without strikes, hopefully this time, so that we can actually physically meet.
Great, looking forward to it. Thank you very much, and see you in October.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.